In honor of Mr. Joe Madison, it is truly a pleasure to have on Vice President Kamala Harris. Thank you for being here, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Clay. I'm actually on Air Force Two heading to South Carolina. I know Joe would want that. I'm heading over there because we want to make sure everybody gets out to vote for the first Democratic primary, and for the first time historically it'll be in South Carolina. But I just have to say to you, to your listeners, to Sherry, Mr. Madison's wife, and their children, I was so very sorry to hear the news of his passing. You know, I just talked to him, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and I love Joe Madison. I have to tell you, he was one of the first interviews I did when I arrived in D.C. in the United States Senate. I looked it up. It was in that February. I arrived in D.C. that January of 2017, and Joe Madison was one of the first serious interviews that I did after becoming only the second black woman to join the United States Senate. And he was just such a dear, and just I always just enjoyed just talking with him and laughing with him about our world and our country.
Absolutely. And Vice President Harris, the road to Congress really was talking to Joe Madison. It honestly was talking to Joe Madison. That was such an important part if you wanted to connect with black communities, talking to him. What are your memories sitting down with the one and only Mr. Joe Madison?
Joe Madison, first of all, my memories are of over the years, whenever there was a moment in terms of what was happening in our country that was a significant moment, an inflection moment, I always talked with Joe Madison. And in fact, the first interview I did was after or during the time that I was questioning the then Attorney General that was being appointed, Jeff Sessions, under then President Trump. And over the years, whenever every big moment came, I would talk with Joe Madison, and he would always be able to, in the conversation, remind us all about the history on an issue. He always had a perspective that is a reflection of the voice of the people. And then he always had a wonderful way of finding something humorous about the moment, in a way that we all understood the ironies of these moments, the hypocrisy of the moment, but also when we could even just think about the joy of a moment. And Joe would always ask, Joe Madison would always ask, and he would ask of us all to ask, what are we going to do about it,
yes,
whatever that moment was, especially when it was a challenging moment.
Before you go, Vice President Harris, we all know that Mr. Joe Madison was a true advocate for voting rights. He went on a hunger strike. That is part of his legacy. If you could just speak to the audience of the kind of work that he did around voting rights, and especially in this 2024 election cycle, how he would want us to show up, how he would want us to participate.
So the character of Joe Madison that I so admired is the character that he had an incredible sense of optimism about what is possible, but it was, to your point, a lived experience for him that he reminded us all of, that you got to fight. You got to fight for progress, and you can't be passive. You can't be a passive observer. Joe Madison, he loves our people, and always had an incredible amount of pride, and that pride extended to always, reminding us all that we got to participate, we got to be active around election time, we got to vote. I certainly think about this election coming up this November being an election where we each have to decide what kind of country do we want to live in. And I think that, knowing Joe, if I could be so bold as to say, he would say, well, you can participate in deciding what kind of country you want to live in, and one way to do that is by voting.
I truly thank you. My audience thanks you for coming on in this moment and speaking to us. Vice President Kamala Harris, it is truly an honor. Thank you once again for coming on to honor family, Mr. Joe Madison. Thank you, Vice President Kamala Harris.
I thank you, and let me just say, I know that all of the listeners are part of his family, and I know I will say it as somebody who has been honored to be a part of the conversations with him, that Doug and I, we send our prayers to Sherry and their children and to everybody, because I know how he really loved the people he worked with, and it was part of his family as well. So I'm just thinking of all of you, and let's just keep that incredible Joe Madison alive in terms of his spirit in our memories and in our thoughts. And thank you, and take care. I'll talk to you later.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Vice President Kamala Harris honoring Mr. Joe Madison. Thank you so much. You have a good day. Be safe. Be blessed. Round of applause, please, for Vice President Kamala Harris coming on in this moment to honor somebody who was so crucial in our legacy in black media. I truly, truly appreciate her showing up in this moment. That means something. Showing up in this moment as she is traveling to South Carolina.